Hi everyone, my name is Albert and I'm the CEO of CircuitMiss, and in this video I will be explaining to you how to assemble our newest product called CircuitMiss Armstrong. CircuitMiss Armstrong is a super cool robot arm that can actually move. It looks like this. After you assemble it, you power it up, and it has lots of different joints and a color sensor that can actually sense the color of the different objects. This is what it looks like when it's assembled, so it moves around, it can grasp things, and also you have this part at the back where you can basically memorize the different movements and the different positions of the arm, and after that you can sort of like create a sequence that the arm is going to repeat, just like this. The main point of this product is we wanted to bring the world of industrial automation to your houses, to your homes, because we wanted to explain how these big robot arms that are usually used in big factories are made, how they work, and how they actually are operated. Anyways, let's get down to work. The first thing that we're going to check out is all of the components that we got in the box. So let's check it out. As you can see, we have a bunch of different components here. This is one of our biggest kits yet, with lots of different components, because we really wanted to create an impressive robot arm that's going to have lots of these different joints, 4 different motors, 3 different circuit boards, and lots of these different plastic parts. These are the components that you should get inside your box. You should get a couple of bags with these plastic parts, these ones here. Also a few of these test objects. So these are made out of sponge and they are included in your kit so that you can have something to pick up with your Armstrong. Also, they have different colors so that you can test the color sensor and see whether it's working. You have a bag with different circuit boards inside. You should get a total of 3 different circuit boards. The circuit boards, there are 3 main parts. You should get this, we call it the control circuit board. This one has a USB port on it and a bunch of these different spots for electronic components. We call it the control board because this one actually has all of these different knobs, push buttons, and LEDs on it, and it's used for controlling your Armstrong. So this is the board, the circuit board. The second circuit board that you should get, we call it the main board or the brain board. This one has the main CPU, the central processing unit that's used for controlling your arm. So this is the thing, this is the main chip that's responsible for controlling and moving your robot arm's motors. This one is actually placed at the base of the robot here. So as you can see, this is where the circuit board is placed. And the third circuit board, it has the name of the product, Armstrong, written on it. This is the thing. This one goes into the hand of the robot, and it has a color sensor and an LED so that it can detect colors. And the LED, the light emitting diode, it's required because it needs to light up and it needs to have a bright object. So the LED basically shines the light onto the object reflects that light, the light goes back to the color sensor, and that's how it actually sees the color. Besides that, you should also get this sheet of stickers. The stickers are purely cosmetic. You put it on your robot's pieces. You should also get 4 of these plastic knobs. These are put onto the encoders. A few of these bags with different electronic and mechanical components. 4 servo motors, as you can see, with the wires. This battery holder inside, this is actually used if you want to connect your Armstrong with your Wheelson, if you want to put it on the car so that you can basically get a car with a robot arm on it, and also a USB cable. A tiny booklet as well, which has a little story about industrial automation and the way robot arms have evolved through the past. Anyways, let's move on. The first thing that we're going to do, we will have to solder all of the different electronic components onto the circuit boards that you have gotten in your kit. Okay, when it comes to soldering together electronic components, if you have never soldered before, I'm going to explain a few ground rules. So first things first, if you want to solder these electronic components onto the circuit board, you will need a certain set of tools. If you don't have them, you can purchase them on circuitmist.com, or you can get them in your local tool store or something like that. The main thing that you will need is a soldering iron. So this is something that we recommend, a soldering iron that looks like this, that has a fine tip and that preferably has some kind of temperature regulation so that you can solder more precisely. The second thing that you need is a set of these protective goggles. So safety first, you need to put these on so that you don't get something unwanted in your eyes. You should also get some kind of a stand for holding your soldering iron because you don't want to damage your mom's table, a tiny sponge that can be used for wiping your soldering iron clean, a screwdriver because this is important for assembling this one because it has like a whole bunch of different screws, nuts, bolts, and also you will need a pair of these cutting pliers that are used for cutting off the excess legs on your electronic components. Finally, the thing that actually makes the electronic components stick together to the circuit board is a piece of this soldering wire. You will need this one if you want to solder all of these electronic components together. If you have never soldered before, soldering is basically a process where you connect the electronic components with the electronic circuit board using solder and a soldering iron. The circuit board is actually something like a motherboard in your computer. It connects all of these different electronic components so that they can all work together in harmony. One very important thing that you should also do, if you don't have something like this, find a piece of paper, a piece of cardboard, put it on your table so that you don't damage your table while you are assembling this. This is actually a soldering mat from CircuitMist. We have designed this specifically out of a special piece of rubber that is heat resistant, and we've also put all of these different tiny compartments so that you can put all of your electronic components in them so that they don't get lost in the process of soldering everything together. Okay, so if you want to solder correctly, safely, and in a fun and easy way, you should put your soldering iron at around 360 degrees Celsius. On my soldering iron, I have this tiny display which basically says the temperature, and I can use the plus and minus symbols for changing the temperature of the soldering irons. I need to wait for it to heat up, and also I need to put a tiny bit of water on my soldering sponge so that I can wipe my soldering iron clean. This is very important because sometimes your soldering iron gets dirty from all of the different impurities in your soldering wire. In that case, you need to slightly wipe your soldering iron clean like this. Your tip should be shiny, clean. It should have this like silvery color at every single time if you want to have proper and good soldering joints, just like this. Awesome. After I have turned on my soldering iron, I should definitely make sure that nothing on my table catches fire. Just move them away so that you can have more space on your table to actually solder the electronic components. Once you have done that, feel free to open these tiny bags and put all of the different electronic components on your table so that you can check them out. Just a friendly reminder, soldering irons get really hot, so make sure not to touch them here. You need to touch them and hold them like a pencil, like this. Best thing to do it is just to slightly, push it away until you pack all of the electronic components and put them on the table. After you have put all of the electronic components on your table in an organized way like this, we can check out all the different parts that we got inside. So, as I said, we have 3 different circuit boards that we will be soldering right now. The one used for the color sensor, the brain circuit board, that controls all the things, and the control circuit board that actually enables you to control your arm by having all of these different knobs, push buttons, and LEDs, light emitting diodes. Besides that, you should get a bunch of these different connectors that you can see here. These connectors are used for connecting all of the circuit boards together and to the servo motors. You also have a bunch of push buttons here, a bunch of these protective anti-slip pads, a bunch of LEDs, a bunch of these different connectors, these rotary knobs that will be used for controlling the robot, push button caps, and also this one. This is a multi-color light emitting diode, or an RGB red, green, blue LED diode. This one is going to light up in different colors so that you can actually see which color the robot arm perceives and which color it sees. Anyways, let's start with the biggest one. So we'll put these on the side, and let's start with this one. This is called the control circuit board, and we will be soldering the electronic components to this one as a start. Let's start by putting these push buttons onto your circuit board. The push buttons, this is what they look like. We should put them on these spaces here. So the push buttons will be used for controlling your robot arm's movement. You will be able to save different positions and different poses of the arm with these push buttons, and then you will be able to create a sequence that the robot arm is going to repeat, just like a big industrial robot. One thing that you have to be very careful about is the placement of these push buttons. So as you can see, this circuit board actually has two different sides. The front side is the one that has the circuit miss and Armstrong written on it and has all of these different chips. The back side, this one, is where you solder the components. This one, as you can see, is bare. It doesn't have any chips. So every single component that we're going to solder, we have to place it at the front side where the chips are, and then we have to solder at the bottom side like this. Let's see how that goes. So let's first put the electronic push buttons here. As you can see, we put them on these tiny markings here. So just repeat after me. We can place all of the different push buttons down like this. We need a total of 5 push buttons. You might get a few extra that we are putting in just in case you lose a push button, then you can use one as an extra. Okay, this is what they should look like after you place them. The push buttons should be placed like this on the top side where there are other chips and the USB port placed as well. And on the bottom side is where we are going to solder these soldering joints so that the electronic components can be connected with the circuit board. We can achieve this easily by using our soldering iron. Soldering is quite easy. You take the soldering iron in one hand and the solder wire in the other hand. You place the soldering iron on the pad that you are soldering just like this. You hold it just a little bit to heat up the pad, and then you start adding some solder just like this. And the solder should melt. You should wait like this and then heat the pad just a bit more until you get this nice volcano-like shape. This is what a good soldering joint looks like. It should be shaped like a volcano, and it should have this nice silverly finish to it. Be mindful of cleaning your soldering iron, so just clean it like this every now and then so that you can have a clear tip, a clean tip that's going to ensure easy and fast soldering. After we solder the push buttons, this is what the circuit board should look like. So you should have 5 of these different push buttons here. As you can see, they're making these clicky sounds once you press them. And on the back side, you can see the soldering joints. They should look something like this. They should have this nice little shape. Let's move on to the next components. The next thing that we're going to solder is 5 of these red light emitting diodes, or LEDs. This is what the components look like. And these little guys are going to light up when different commands and different positions are placed on your robot arm. This serves as an indication so that we know what's going on with your robot arm. There's one little thing that you have to be careful about. The light emitting diodes are polarized, which means that they have a certain specific way of going into your circuit board. So as you can see, each light emitting diode has two tiny legs, and each leg has a different size. So there is a longer leg and also a shorter leg. So how are you going to put them in? So the shorter leg actually needs to go to this dash on this circle, as you can see here. So the shorter leg should be pointing to the right. As you can see here, this is the tiny chipped off piece of the circle on the marking of the circuit board. So the tiny shorter leg of the LED should be going to the right, just like this on every single LED's place. So this is what it should be placed like. When you place the LED inside, be mindful that the shorter legs goes to the right side. You can place it in like this, and as a way of helping yourself when you're assembling this, just hold it in place, turn the circuit board around, and then you can slightly bend the legs of the light emitting diode of the LED so that it doesn't fall out when you're soldering. After you put your light emitting diode in, you need to solder it just like we did with the push buttons. So you bring your soldering iron close and you add some solder. There's one more thing that we need to do with the light emitting diodes. We need to use our cutting pliers to cut off these excess legs of the light emitting diode. You do this by using your cutting pliers, but just be careful. Do not look at this and do not point it in your eyes. You should do it like this. You should turn the circuit board around, not point it in any person or animal or something like that, and just cut them so that they fall out into the table. This way you won't lose these tiny legs, and also you won't have them in your eyes. We should do the same thing with every single one of these light emitting diodes. So the shorter leg is going to the right side, as you can see, and we can just put it in like this, and let's do that with every single light emitting diode here. So after we have soldered the light emitting diodes in place, this is what the circuit board should look from the back side, and the front side should look like this. You should have 5 of these LEDs. Watch out when you're soldering this to orient the LEDs the right way around. So you should place them with a shorter leg pointing to the right. After this, let's move on to the new component. We're going to solder these big knobs here. So these components are actually called the encoders, and what they do, so every single time you do a small step, you're going to feel like a small click when rotating these. This component is actually sending a signal to the main processor that's controlling the whole thing. We're going to place these big black knobs onto these things, onto the encoders, so that we can rotate them and that way control the robot arm. These 4 components are going into these 4 big circles here. And as you can see, this component is not symmetrical. It has a bunch of these different pins, but you should place them so that this one pin in the middle is looking upwards. You basically can't miss it. Just take a look at the footprint of the component. It's going to snap in quite nicely, just like this. You can place all 4 of them. These are really big, but they also have these pins that are holding them in place so that they won't fall off after you put them in. So you can just put all 4 of them inside, and then we will solder away. On each one of these big encoders, you actually have 5 pins that are used for sending the signals to the circuit board and powering the whole thing. So you should solder 5 of them. You will also see these 2 big pins that are, well, just required to hold the thing in place. You don't have to solder those, just solder the 5 ones with the pads here, as you can see. The soldering process goes the same like every single other component. You just put your soldering iron on the pad, you heat it a bit, then you place some solder, and then you let it melt. You need to establish a firm connection between the circuit board and the pin here. After we have soldered all of the rotary encoders onto the circuit board, this is what the board should look from the back, and this is what it should look from the front. You can also try them out, try rotating them a bit. This is what they should look like. Cool, so after we finish with that, our control board is finished and we can move on to the next circuit board. So the next one is called the brain board. This is what it looks like. It has this microprocessor here and a bunch of these different electronic components. All of the other components are actually used for connecting the motors to the microprocessor that we have right here. We will start by soldering a push button to this one as well. So as you can see, we have one push button left and this one actually needs to go here. This is used as a reset push button so that you can reset your device in case you will, well, need to do that. So let's place it on the circuit board here. The same rule applies. We need to put all of the electronic components on the top side of the circuit board where we have all of the other different chips placed. On the bottom side of the circuit board is where the soldering is actually going to happen. So make sure to put the right way in. You place the component on the top side like this, then you rotate the circuit board and then you solder on the back side just like this. We will solder this one just the way we did with the other electronic components. You put your soldering iron close, you heat the pad and then you add some solder. You need to have a clean joint that looks nice and it's going to ensure that electricity flows through the electronic component. After you solder this, this is what your board should look like. You should have this push button here and you can try clicking it. It should produce this clicky sound, just like this. The next thing we're going to solder is this tiny white connector here. This one is placed on this spot here. This one is actually used for connecting your Armstrong to your robot car Wheelson, if you have it. It's one of our other kits used for teaching children about computer vision and autonomous vehicles, and you can actually use this connector and a couple of other pieces in this kit to connect the two products together. We will just solder this one for now. It's not going to be used in this build, but we will be making a separate guide on how to connect these two together. You have to watch out for just one tiny detail when soldering this. So this component actually has a tiny notch on one of its sides. So as you can see, this is the notch here, and on the other side you do not have the notch. So this notch should actually look in the direction of this microprocessor, this big metallic square thing here. So you place it like this, as you can see here. So you should place it like this, and the notch should be looking this way to the big microprocessor that we have here. After you place the component, just rotate the circuit board like this, and then you have to solder just the way you do with the other electronic components. Let's check it out. So we solder this one. And then we solder the other one as well. This is what the connector should look like when you place it. So it should be looking, the notch should be looking inwards like this. The other side of the connector doesn't have a notch. It's placed right here, as you can see. After this, we're going to solder these tiny connectors that are used for connecting your main brain board with the motors and with the color sensor. we will need 4 of these 3-pin connectors and one 4-pin connector, as you can see here. The 3-pin connectors are placed on these servo markings, as you can see here. So there's 4 motors on your robot arm: servo 1, servo 2, servo 3, and servo 4. Each servo motor is actually controlled and supplied by 3 lines. You have the positive power supply, the negative power supply, and the control wire, which basically sends a signal that controls the servo motor. You can see the servo motor here. It has 3 wires, and these wires will be placed and plugged into these connectors that we are going to put here. The 4-pin connector is going to be placed at the color sensor marking here. So the color sensor, it needs 4 different wires to work. It needs 2 power supply lines, so the positive and the negative one, and also it needs 2 data lines. So one is actually for transmitting data and the other one is for transmitting the clock, which is basically like a certain frequency that is made in the communication between the main CPU and the color sensor. The way we are soldering this, it's pretty much the same as with the other connectors. So you place the connector on the top side of the circuit board and then you solder on the bottom side of the circuit board. These connectors might get a bit tricky because they can fall out, but just make sure to hold them with your hand when you are rotating the circuit board like this, and you will be able to position them correctly. What I do recommend is when you are soldering any kind of a connector that looks like this, first solder one of the pins, like this. Just solder one pin. And then you can check if the connector is placed right. If it's slightly crooked, if it's slightly angled or bent, you can always reheat the spin and then just slightly move the connector until it's perpendicular, just like this. After you've made sure that the connector is sitting right, go ahead and solder the rest of the soldering joints here. Okay, so this is what the board should look like with the connector attached. This is the first one. We're going to solder 3 more on these places here, and then the big 4-pin one here where it says color sensor. Let's move on. After you have soldered all 4 of the servo motor connectors, this is what the circuit board should look like. So as you can see, you have 4 pins here. They should be perpendicular, just like this. And on the bottom side, you should have the soldering joints firmly soldered like this. Let's move on to the color sensor connector. So this is the 4-pin one, and you need to place it here where it says the color sensor. Hold the pin, rotate the circuit board, and then solder one of the pins so that you can see if the connector has been placed correctly, if it's sitting upright. If you see that it's slightly bent, and just reheat it again, and you can always move it. After that, solder all of the remaining electronic connections here, all of the remaining pads, and that's it. The last component we need to put on this circuit board is a multi-color light-emitting diode, also called the RGB LED diode. RGB stands for red, green, blue, and this light-emitting diode is actually 3 different diodes: the red one, the green one, and the blue one, all fused in one big packaging. And by dimming these 3 different LEDs, you can basically achieve different colors. This light-emitting diode has 4 different pins. It's a very special diode. We need to watch out when placing this one to not place it the wrong way around. And this one, when you assemble your robot arm, this one is actually going to light up in the different colors that your robot arm sees. So in other words, if you place this blue cube in front of your robot arm's sensor, this light emitting diode is going to shine blue. If you place a green one, it's going to shine green, and etc. The multicolor light emitting diode is going to be placed on your circuit board on this place right here, and you have to watch out when you're placing it in, so it should be placed like this. Make sure that you pay attention to all the different pins that you have here. This is the way they should go. The only way to actually make sure it goes the right way in is by taking a look at the sizes of these pins. So make sure that your circuit board has the main CPU turned towards you like this, and then the light emitting diode, you should put it like this and then slide it inside here, as you can see. Just pause the video right here if you want. Okay, after you place it, you can just bend the legs on the back side so that it doesn't fall off, and then you have to solder them yet again with your soldering iron like this. After you have soldered them, make sure to cut off the legs so that they don't deep fry your electronic circuit, because if they produce a short circuit, that's not going to work well for our processor here. When cutting this, make sure to point them to the table so that they don't fall off onto the ground or in your eyes or something like that. Finally, we need to assemble this one. This is the color sensor that is put on the front side of your robotic arm. This one has just this 4-pin connector that is used for connecting this to the brain board. We will use this remaining connector. We need to place it like this. So take your circuit board, locate the name of the product, so Armstrong, then flip the circuit board like this, and you need to place your component, your connector, on this side right here. Flip the circuit board with the connector in it and solder. You can solder just one pin first. Just to solder one pin like this in order to make sure that it's perpendicular, and then solder the remaining pins. Cool. Let's store this away just for the moment, and now we can move on to the part where we will be connecting all of the plastic pieces together. Before that, if you want, you can use these tiny button caps and place them on the push buttons of this electronic board here. So they are placed like this. You just gently push and you can put them right here, just like this. You have 5 of them and you can put them on the push buttons here. The knobs for the encoders can also be placed on them right now. You just place them like this. You have this tiny slot in it, and then you just place them all the way down like this. Awesome. Great. Let's store the circuit boards away for now, but good news, you can actually turn off your soldering iron now because we have finished with the soldering part of this electronic kit. What remains is the mechanical assembly of this product. We're basically halfway done, so just wipe your soldering iron clean, turn it off, plug it out of your power supply, and just let it cool. Make sure not to forget about the thing, don't burn your fingers, and we can store this away. Let's move on. Okay, so the next step after we have soldered everything is to check out the plastic pieces that we have gotten in our kit. We will start by just unpacking all of these pieces and putting them on the table right here. After we have peeled the protective film from all of the plastic pieces, this is what they should look like. You can also leave them with the protective film on. then your Armstrong is going to have a slightly different whitish look. Let's just put all of these pieces aside for one moment here, because there is this one very important step that we need to perform, and it's called the motor calibration. I'm going to show you. So for this step, we will need two of our biggest circuit boards, the control one and the brain board, the one with the processor on it. We will also need four of these servo motors, this bag with all of these different tiny plastic levers. This is what they look like. We will actually need four levers just like this. A USB cable, and also this one. This is a white flat cable that is used for connecting the control board with the main brain board. So, first things first, we need to connect these two together, and this is going to happen using this cable right here. These connectors here and here are actually used for interfacing the two boards together. We firstly need to open up the connectors, and we're going to do this by ejecting this great piece of plastic here so that the connector opens like this. So now the connector is open, as you can see. We need to do the same thing on the second circuit board as well. Then we need to take this flat cable and we need to turn them in a way that we can see this blue thing on top. So the way these connectors are placed, it works like this. You take the connector, the blue side is showing up, and then you slide it into the housing right here. And after you place it in, you need to lock it by taking this gray thing and then pressing it inside like this. Once you do that, it should be held in place like this. The same thing goes this other circuit board, so the blue side is looking up, and then we place it in like this, and then we lock it with this gray piece of plastic like this. You press, and then you'll have a connection that should be firm like this. We won't be finished with our Armstrong just yet. The thing that we will be doing right here, we will actually be setting the servo motors to the 0 position that is needed for assembling the robot correctly. Let's see how that works. So, as I said, we need to set the motors to the 0 position so that we can assemble this robot arm correctly. We will do this by connecting the servo motors to the circuit board, powering the circuit board on so that all of the motors reset to their initial position. This way, we will be able to assemble a robot arm that has all of the positions of all of the motors at the right place. That way, it will have full motion so that it can move around to all of the different sides and all the different rotations that we have imagined. First, we need to connect the servo motors to this board right here. As you can see, we have 4 of these different servo connectors here. Every single one of these servo connectors has 3 pins. Each pin has a color written next to it. As you can see, yellow, red, brown, yellow, red, brown, yellow, red, brown, yellow, red, brown. This corresponds to the colors of the wires of your servo motor here. You have to watch out so that you plug them in the right way. So follow the markings here, yellow, red, and brown. So I'm plugging in this one, yellow, red, and brown. The second one goes just like that, yellow, red, and brown. Then on the other side, it's mirrored, so it goes yellow, red, brown, and this one also yellow, red, and brown. Awesome. Don't power on your circuit board just yet. We need to do this one final thing. So you need to take these plastic levers and you need to place them on your servo motors. And you need to do this. So place them on the middle position, just like this, and then turn them all the way right until it goes, just like this. Do this with every single servo motor. So place the black lever like this, and then turn them clockwise to the right until it goes. So after we have plugged all of this in, and after we have moved all of the servo motors to the right, we're going to plug this in. Just keep an eye on all of the 4 servo motors. All of them should move. So all 4 of these servo motors should go to their designated positions so that when you assemble this robot, you have it at the right position. So we're going to plug this in. I just took a power supply. You can plug it in your computer, in your phone's charger, basically in every single USB port, and in the USB-C on the circuit board. When you plug this in, the servo motors are going to move, and you will have to leave them at their spots, just like this. So I plug this in. As you can see, all 4 of those servo motors have moved. One more very important thing. So after you have plugged in all of these servo motors, do not unplug them, because all of these servo motors have now been placed in their specific positions for the specific parts of the robot arm. Therefore, we need to leave them plugged in to all of these different designated spots. And when we will be assembling this, we will take a certain servo motor. In example, we'll take servo 1 and then put it in the specific part of the arm. Cool. After we have done this, we can unplug this from the power supply and we can move on with the mechanical assembly. Okay, so for the next step, we will need to prepare the following components in order to put the stickers onto them. Make sure to stop this video and to find the components that I have in front of me on this table and place them on your table exactly like this. Make sure to flip them the right way around, because this is going to be super important for this step. So you need to find these components and place them on the table, okay? After you place the stickers on your pieces, on your plastic pieces, this is what they should look like. So feel free to pause the video right now and place the stickers. Just take your time, place them at the designated locations here. Of course, you don't have to place the stickers if you don't want to, but in my opinion, you know, they're quite pretty, so they're going to make your Armstrong look a bit nicer. So, for the next step, we will need the following pieces. We will need 2 of these big plastic pieces, 2 of these banana-shaped like ones, and 1 of these round pieces. We will also need a bunch of these other mechanical components. So we will need this lever here, 2 of these small metal screws, and also 1 of these spacers. So what might come in handy when assembling Armstrong is some kind of a ruler. I have this fancy ruler here, so I will be measuring the different things that I'm showing to you so that you can find the appropriate one. Since we have lots of these different sizes of these black spacers, make sure not to find the wrong one. You know, we need to find the right one. And I'm going to show you the sizes so that you can check whether you have found the right one with the ruler. So we will need this black spacer, which is 6 centimeters in length. So once you find these parts, place them on your table like this, and we'll continue. So first things first, take this round piece of plastic here and take this lever. You need to put this thing together by watching out that the tiny hole for the shaft of the motor looks upwards. So this lever, as you can see, it has 2 different sides. This side which has a hole for a motor, needs to look upwards because we will be putting a motor in it from the top like this. You need to place it underneath in these two holes so that the hole for the motor is looking upwards. You take these two metallic screws and then you need to screw them in to these two holes right here. Take a screwdriver and just screw them into the black plastic like this. And the other one as well. As you can see, this is the final thing, and we need to watch out. So if we take a motor like this, it needs to go in like this. So you need to be able to plug it in like this. We'll need a few more pieces to assemble this step together. We will need two of these small black spacers. They have a length of 8 millimeters. And we will also need 4 tiny black plastic screws. So we will take these and we need to put them on the bottom side of this piece. So here you have to just watch out to place these spacers on the bottom side like this. So you take the spacers, take the screws, you screw them together, and this is what you should get. Okay, so this is what it should look like. The hole for the servo on the top side, the spacers on the bottom side. After that, let's take these two pieces. We will need one of these super long spacers. This spacer is 6 centimeters long, which is 60 millimeters. So the thing we're going to do here, first, let's place this super long spacer in one of the side pieces like this. Okay, so this is what it should look like. You have a spacer, you have the side piece, this is the thing that we need. Now, let's take this board. As you've seen, I've plugged out the ribbon cable, the connector, from this board so that I can assemble this easier. The board needs to slot in to this piece like this. And then I need to turn it around and place the other one here, like this. Okay, here it goes. So now I need to take this long screw and I need to put it here and screw it, just like this. Okay, so this is the thing that you should have. This is what it should look like. Now, I need to take this one and slot it in here. And then I need to take these two legs and I need to mount them onto the base here. For this, I need these two screws and I need to put them together like this. So I turn this around like this. I place the leg here and then I screw it like this. Okay, and the other one goes here. Awesome, great job. So this is what you should have now. This is the final thing. This is the first piece of the Armstrong's mechanical assembly process. This is the base that's going to hold all of the things together. One last thing you should do here, so take 4 of these rubber pads. The pads actually have a protective film on the other side, which has a sticky surface underneath. So you should remove the stickers here, just like this, and then you should stick these 4 sides of the base here. And this is what the thing should look like. For the next step, we will mount the servo motors on the plastic pieces. So for this one, we will need your board with the servo motors. Don't unplug them. It's very important to have them plugged in. Also, don't move the shafts of the servo motors. Just remove these tiny black levers because you won't need them. But don't rotate the servo motors, just leave them in place. They won't go anywhere. Just leave them as they are because they have to be at these special, specific, designated positions once we will be placing them onto the robot arm. Alongside them, we will need 8 of these metal screws. So these are the biggest metal screws you have. They look like this and they will be used for mounting the servo motors onto the different pieces. Also, we will need 3 of these plastic pieces. So 2 of them have these stickers. They look just like this. And we also have this one without a sticker. You will need this one as well because it's used for the servo pincher. So let's move on. First, let's start with the motor that's going to be placed in the base of your Armstrong. For this one, we'll be using the servo on the spot called the servo 1. We need to find that one and we need to place it on the circuit board here. So what's important here? So here's where the servo motor is going to be placed, and what's important here is to have this wire that's going out of the servo motor, to have it look in the side of the main processor here. So it needs to be oriented like this. So be careful not to place the servo the wrong way around. You have to place it like this. After you place it here, just hold it with your finger, turn the circuit board, and then use these big screws to mount the servo motor to the circuit board like this. Okay, and the other one as well. The screws, as you can see, they're here, and the shaft needs to look in the direction of the processor. As you can see, this is what it should look like. Let's move on. Let's assemble the servo motor that's going to be used for pinching. So this is going to be used for the pincher, the thing that actually grabs things on the front of the robot arm. So for the next step, we'll need to take this piece, make sure to turn them this way around to turn this piece like this, and you need to find a servo that's plugged in to the spot called servo 3. You need to take it and you need to place it just like this so that the wires are showing in this direction. So this is how it should go in. After you place it like this, you need to take the 2 screws and you need to screw them together just like this. Awesome. So now we have this piece. For the next piece, we need to take this one. So the one with the horn here. And we need to take a servo that's at the place at the designated port called servo 2. We need to take this one and we need to place it in this piece like this. So make sure to place it correctly. The shaft should be looking at this side here. So this is what it should look like when it goes inside, like this. So once we do that, we need to place the screws on the other end like this. Okay, so this is what the piece should look like. This is where the shaft is. So this is the thing. So this is servo 2. Make sure not to mess them up. And finally, we have servo 4, which goes into this piece. We need to do the same thing. Put the servo inside, but it has a special way of going inside. So you need to have this shaft looking at this side here. So we should go like this. So the shaft is looking upwards like this. okay? And on the other side, we also need to put the screws in order to fixate the other one as well, like this. So this is what the piece should look like. As you can see, the sticker is on this side, and on the other side, the shaft is looking in this direction. For the next step, we will assemble the pincher. So for this one, we will need the following pieces. We will need 2 of these plastic pieces that are used for the pincher. This is how we call the tiny grappling thing on the front side of the robot. So these 2 little pieces here. We will need this lever. So this one is used for connecting the pincher with the servo motor. We will need 2 of these metal screws. We will need this one, the bigger one, and also this super small screw here. We will need 2 spacers. One is longer, and it's 8 millimeters in length, and also the super small spacer, which is 5 millimeters in length. Make sure to use your ruler to locate the appropriate pieces, put them in front of you, and let's assemble away. So take these 2 plastic parts and put them on your table. Make sure to place them exactly the way I did, because we mustn't assemble them the wrong way. This part with 2 holes needs to be on the right side like this, and this part with 1 hole needs to be on the left side, looking like this. So they need to look inwards. Now let's take the big, long, black plastic screw, and we're going to put it in the left plastic piece here. We need to put it all the way down, and then take the small spacer and screw it to the end, just like this. Okay, this is what the piece should look like. So you should have one part of the pincher looking like this. Let's take this part and let's place it on the pincher part here. So this part right here, this is going to be the motor that's controlling the pincher. So we need to take this part, and it goes in this hole right here, like this, okay? So right here, like this. On the other side, we need to tighten it with this long spacer that we have prepared. So put it here, like this. Screw it all the way down, but you don't have to tighten it real hard. Just tighten it so that it can be rotated like this. Now, let's take this other part here. Now, let's take this other part of the pincher here. It's going to go here, as you can see, but we need to take this plastic lever and we need to put it in a way that we can mount it to the motor. Take this part and take this lever. The hole for the motor mount should be looking downwards like this. And you need to take this screw. It's going to fit it together, and then connect the 2 plastic pieces together like this. Okay, so as you can see, this is the thing that we got. This is the plastic lever. This is the plastic piece. And we don't have a motor hole here. We have it on the other side, because this is where the motor is going to be mounted, like this, okay? So this is a very important part. So the important step here is that the motor was set in a way that the pincher is closed, so like this. So we need to mount this part as if the arm is closed. So mount it on the motor like this. So this is how we should put it, as if it was closed, you know. This is the initial position of this motor. And then we need to take this small screw here, and we need to connect the lever of the motor with the motor. Just take a screwdriver, gently screw it in here, like this. Okay, now that you have done this, you can try opening and closing your motor like this. Leave it in the closed position and let's move on to the next part. For the next step, we need to find the following pieces, and don't die just yet. We only have like 4 hours of assembly. So we need to find a few of these plastic parts. So we need 2 of these weird ones, as you can see here. We need 3 of these different plastic levers. We also need 4 black plastic screws. The plastic screws are roughly 14 millimeters in length. We need 4 of them. And we need 2 spacers. One of these spacers is a bit longer, roughly 26 millimeters, and the other one is shorter, roughly 23. So make sure to measure and find the right parts. Finally, we will need the circuit board with a color sensor. You can easily locate it. It has the big Armstrong logo on it. So once you find all of these pieces, let's move on. Let's start assembling the pieces of the arm. We'll soon have the whole robot assembled together. So first take this funny shaped piece. Place it like this, as I'm showing you on the screen. We also need 2 of these shorter ones and the 2 spacers. So let's start by placing the first plastic lever here. Now we need to take the longer spacer, so make sure to take the longer one. As you can see, I have the longer one and the slightly shorter one. So the longer one goes here, right here. We need to fixate it with a screw, like this. You put the screw from the outside and the spacer from the inside. Like this. So this is what you should get. Feel free to pause the video and check it out. Then let's take the other one, the other lever here. We're going to use the smaller, shorter spacer here. Yet again, we need to mount it with a screw on the back, like this, right here. So this is what you should get. We have this part, a longer spacer here, a shorter spacer here, and 2 of these plastic pieces that are going to be used on the arm. So now comes the tricky part. We need to connect all of these different pieces together so that we can assemble the front, the head, the pincher of the robot arm. So first, let's take this circuit board with the color sensor. We need to slot it in here. So like this. As you can see, it goes inside here, like this. Just place it here. It's going to stand on its own like this. Okay. The next step, we need to take this thing, and as you can see, it has 2 slots that are placed like this. So this is the thing that we're building. Now, on the other side, we need to take the second half of this pincher, and we need to place it like this. And finally, secure it by screwing this top hole here. So here, we need to connect them together with this top spacer, just like this. Okay, so now that we have assembled this, this is what it should look like. As you can see, we have the 2 parts here, the pincher here, the circuit board, and this screw here. Do not screw this one because we need to put one more piece right here. So finally, we have to put this long lever to this place here. Just one thing you have to have in mind, so this thing is not symmetrical. You have to watch out so that you have these 3 tiny elliptical holes looking at this side, so the left side, and then you have this singular hole looking to the right side. So this is how it should be put. After that, take a big screw, place it in it just like this. Okay, so this is the final part that you should have. This is what it should look like. And all of these tiny levers should be movable with your hand. The first thing that we're going to do, we need to place this plastic lever onto this piece here. So this one here. The lever needs to go so that the hole for the motor is upside. So in other words, there's this hole here, needs to look upside like this. We need to take these two metal screws and then we need to mount this from the back side like this. Okay, so we have mounted the lever. As you can see, the hole for the motor is looking upwards like this. This is what it looks at the back, and this is what it looks at the front. Okay, now let's take the following parts. Let's take this triangular piece, this one that we have already assembled. Let's take two of these long screws, one of these short spacers, and one of these longer spacers. We will have to mount this to this pincher that we have already built. First, let's start with the triangular part. We need to place it on it like this. So it goes from the outer side like this. Okay? First, we need to mount the stop hole here like this. And let's put this small spacer on it like this. Okay, so this is what we should get, okay? Now, let's take this piece that we have already built and we need to rotate it like this. So as you can see, this servo mount should look outwards like this, so to the outside of the arm. You need to connect it with the triangular piece on this screw hole right here. We need to take this long screw and put it inside just like this. Okay, so this is what it should look like. You should have these pieces, they should all be movable, and this is what the thing should look like. So, for the next one, we need to take this piece. As you can see, this one has three big holes on the left side and one big hole on the right side. So we need to place it on the existing build by matching it with this piece. So as you can see, three holes on the left side. We need to connect it with the joint right here, like this. So this is where it needs to go inside. So this is what it needs to look like. Then you take one of these big screws, the plastic ones, and you put it inside like this. When you fully screw it inside, this is what the thing should look like. Make sure that the pieces can move like this. But this is what you should have at this point. So for the next step, we will connect these two pieces together. We need the spacer and we need two of these small screws. Just to rehearse, this spacer is roughly 17 millimeters long. So we should take this spacer, put it in the middle of these two parts, like this. So as you can see, we need to connect them like this, between these two, okay? Then let's take these two small screws and let's put them inside, like this. One from one side and the other one from the other side. Cool. This is what it should look like. Next, we need to put these tiny levers onto these two pieces here. First, let's put the right one. we need to put it outside, on the outside piece, like this. So it needs to go like this. And we need to take one of these long screws, put them inside like this, and then take a spacer on the other side. Okay, so this is what it should look like. As you can see, the spacer is here, the plastic part is here. Next, let's take the other one. It goes here. We put the screw, just like this. And then we put the spacer here. Okay, so this is what it should look like. It's on the outer side, like this. Screw is here, spacer is here, like this, okay? So, this is one of the last steps. We need the following parts. We need this weirdly shaped plastic part, 2 of these regular long screws, the ones that are 14 millimeters, 1 of these small screws, and 2 of these small spacers, the 5 millimeter ones. So the next thing that we're going to do, we need to assemble this part, so this piece. Take a look at what it looks. We need to assemble this one with this piece here. So here's one important part. When you're assembling this, you basically need to put it in a way that this lever goes in a way that it's in line with the placement of this hole here. In other words, this is what it should be placed like. So under this angle, so roughly at, this degree. Just put it in like this, and then put this tiny screw inside here. You should then use a screwdriver to screw it like this. Okay, this is what you should get, and now this thing, you should be able to rotate it like this, as you can see. For the next step, we'll connect this piece here with this piece right here. So we need to take this long screw, this one, connect it like this, and then put the spacer on the other side, like this. This is what it looks like. Okay, so this is what you should get. This is the joint we have just connected. Finally, let's take this weirdly shaped piece. You need to turn it in a way that it looks just like this, so don't put it the wrong way around. And it goes here. On top of our construction, we take a screw, we put it down like this, and then we put a spacer on the other side, like this. Okay. So this is what the final thing should look like. For the next step, we need the following pieces. This plastic piece, this plastic lever, 2 of these bigger metal screws, and 1 of these super small metal screws. We'll start by placing this lever on this plastic piece here. The hole for the motor on this lever needs to go upside. It needs to look in this direction. Then we need to turn the whole thing around and place the screws onto these holes here so that we can mount it to the plastic part like this. Okay, so this is what the part should look like. We still have this small screw left. This is going to be used for fixing this to the servo motor. So now we have to take this piece. What's important here is to place this in a way that it's perpendicular to the ground. So this is the exact position. We should place it like this. Use this screw to mount it just like this. Okay, once you mount it, you should be able to rotate the motor like this. Feel free to leave it in this upright position like this. For this final step, we will need the following pieces. We need 2 of these long spacers. These spacers have 50 millimeters, so 5 centimeters. And we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these black screws and one of these small spacers, the 5 millimeter ones. So these are the pieces that we need. Let's start by putting these long spacers in these 2 holes on this part here. So we need to put them here and here. This is how it works. So you place it with the screw on this part here. Okay, then place the other one. Right here, like this. So this is what it should look like. As you can see, 2 spacers here with the holes and the screws here like this. So this is what the thing should look like. Finally, the last thing that we need to do, we need to connect this color sensor with the brain board using this cable. We need to watch out when doing this. So we have this small arrow on the connector here, and we have a small arrow on the connector here. So what this arrow actually tells us is that we need to watch out that the same colored wire is at the arrow on the brain board as it is on the color sensor board. So I will choose the color green, which is the color of this first wire on this cable, and I will put it on the arrow here. But I have to watch out to put the same color on the arrow at the color sensor as well. So the green one is going next to the arrow, just like this. I need to put it in it like this. Okay. Okay, so after I have attached this cable, just, watch out not to reverse the sensor. The green wire that I have designated here is showing to the arrow. You can choose whatever color you want. You perhaps will get a cable with a different coloring, but the only important thing is to have the same orientation on both boards. So to have the same colored wire on the brain board and on the sensor board. Let's move on by putting the whole thing together. We will start doing this by taking this circuit board and slotting it in this hole here. So as you can see, we have a certain slot for the main circuit board right here. Once you put it, it should be placed like this. After that, we're going to take this part and we'll put it as an enclosure to this part here. This is probably the hardest part of this build, but with some patience, just repeat after I do, and you will be able to put it in, like this. Okay, so after I have put this in, the spacers, they need to go all the way down, like this. And then on the other side, I need to put the screws in to finally encapsulate the whole thing, to protect the circuit board and to put the things together like this. I have 2 screw holes Awesome. So the final thing should look like this. As you can see, I have a circuit board inside. I have the connection for the color sensor here. The whole thing is moving. If I try to move it like this, and now the last thing that I need to connect is this one. This lever here needs to connect to this one. This is going to help the arm extend. So I need to put it here, connect it with a screw like this, and put the spacer just like this. And that's it. This is what the arm should look like. For the final step, I need to take this first piece that we built and I need to put the arm inside. So I need to place it like this. It's important to place it in this position because this is the initial position for the motors. And if I do it correctly, my arm will be able to move in all the directions in the right way. We need to use one of these small screws, these ones, for connecting this together. So we put it on the bottom side here and then we screw it like this. Just screw it all the way down, and once you do this, you should have this thing. You'll be able to rotate it using a motor, just like this. Finally, we need to connect these two circuit boards back together. I like to do this by putting the circuit board beneath the spacer here and then up here, and then just slot it in the connector that we have here. Finally, lock the connector like this and you should have a tight connection. So one very important step before we can power on our device. So we need to make sure to just loosen the joints on the robot arm so that it can freely move like this. So as you can see, I can, like with some gentle movements, I can move my arm around like this. If you have tightened these spacers a bit too tight, then the arm won't be able to move as freely. And this is very important because your motors can be damaged if the robot arm wasn't assembled properly and if it can't move freely. After you power on your device, you will see that it turns on and you can move it around like this. If your robot arm can't move freely like this, you should turn it off like this, slightly untighten the joints, and then turn it on again. So make sure not to tighten the joints too much because your Armstrong won't work correctly. Once we have assembled this arm, you can see that these different knobs control the different motors of your robot arm. This one is used for the pincher. This one is used for, we call it the lift. It's lifting the arm. This one is used for rotating the arm. And this one is used for extending the arm like this. You have a bunch of these buttons on the bottom as well. You can use these buttons to memorize certain positions. So let's say I'm going to put my Armstrong in this position here, and I'm going to save a slot here like this. The LED lights up, and then I can basically press number 1 and it's going to go in that position. So if I press 1, it returns to the position. I can erase these slots by holding the button, and then I can go to the other position, hold the slot number 2, and then it saves that one. So I have the position number 1 and the position number 2. I can add 2 more positions. So let's say, let's put one here, and then let's open the pincher like this for the 4th one. And then if I press this button, if I hold it, my robot arm is actually going to do a sequence of these movements that we have just did, as you can see. If I move the encoders, I can speed up the sequence or slow down the sequence. And if I hold it again, then it just stops. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this build guide. This was definitely one of the most ambitious builds that we have made in the STEM box series. We're definitely looking forward to your feedback. And if you need any help, just reach out to us via contact@circuitmiss.com and we'll help you out. See ya and keep making. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.